is the 2025 Chevrolet Equinox, but it's not the EV. This is the gas-powered version, and those two cars don't really have a lot mechanically in common. Another vehicle this car doesn't have a lot in common with is the previous generation Chevrolet Equinox, making it a fresh entry into a very popular segment. Let's take a closer look. As I said off the top, the 2025 Chevy Equinox is really very different from the previous generation, and in my view, that's mostly a good thing. There are a couple of things that carry over, and we'll get to that in a minute, mostly the engine. But one key difference that Canadians might want to know is that this vehicle sadly is no longer built in Canada. It's now assembled in Mexico, and Cami Assembly in Ingersoll, where the previous generation Equinox was built, is now building electric commercial delivery vans. That said, visually, this Equinox is a huge evolution from the previous generation, and I see that as a good thing. I found the older Equinox to be a little bulbous. This is really refined, nice lines, possibly a little bit nondescript in the field of compact SUVs, which it's hard to stand out in any compact SUV these days. They all are kind of shaped and designed very similarly. But I do like some of the edginess. The grille has some nice angles to it that make it stand out. And similarly, some really nice stuff going on here in the interior as well. This is the RS trim. This and the Active trim are both the act as twin top trims, essentially. Same price, slightly different styling elements with the RS, intended to be a bit more sporty. And that carries through here into the interior with some nice red styling elements, such as the stitching on the dashboard, the inserts on the dash, the surrounds on the vents. It's really very sharp, and the materials are nice. It feels well built in here. My one gripe to do with the interior, I feel, is a pretty big one, and that is GM switching away from other types of gear selectors to this stock-based one, which is not entirely unlike what you would find in a Mercedes. Now, I admit this does bring some important benefits. There is a tray for storage up front with a couple of USB ports where you can throw an extra phone in front of the wireless charging pad, which also is great because it's tilted up slightly and keeps the phone really well secured in place. And underneath there's another little storage cubby where you can throw a purse or a wallet and have it mostly out of sight underneath. But the drawback is if you are a multiple car household, or if you switch cars often for work, you might run into some muscle memory issues here. For example, in my personal car, when I pull that right stalk toward me, it squirts the washer fluid. And when I pull this right stalk toward me here in the Equinox, it shifts into neutral. It's sort of disconcerting how many times I've done that while testing this car, and I am a much more heads-up and attentive driver than average. So if you think that that might be something that could cause you some issues, you should take a really close look at it when you're doing a test drive. I'm also not a fan of the lighting controls all being on the left stalk, and for the most part being on the dials within that stalk. Having to reach around the wheel to get to those, I find kind of inconvenient, particularly the rear wiper. It's quite a reach. Interior space is mostly competitive within the segment, with the exception of cargo. We have 844 liters behind the rear seats and 1,798 with them down. That matches up with some of the smaller vehicles in this segment, like the Subaru Forester, for example, but there are several competitors that top 1,000 liters in that rear cargo area, and they're big ones in the segment. We're talking things like the Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage. And it's not as though that space is lost to the second row to create legroom, because the legroom really matches most of the competitors in the segment here. But on the upside, there is a nice and spacious area underneath the cargo load floor, and there's a donut spare underneath that. So there's a safe space to keep fragile items out of the way, and you don't have to deal with a tire inflation kit if you run into any issues. Under the hood, the same 1.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine carries over from the previous generation Equinox, making 175 horsepower and 203 pound-feet of torque. There are some changes to the rest of the drivetrain though. The 6-speed automatic transmission is gone, and you have a choice between two different transmissions. If you opt for front-wheel drive, you get a continuously variable transmission. I have not tested that. My guess is that that's more of a fleet special, and most people are going to want to avoid it. If you choose all-wheel drive though, you get an 8-speed automatic transmission, and this transmission performs well. It shuffles through the gears nicely, and for the most part you'll find it's where you want it to be. Power delivery is pretty good for the segment, at the gas-powered end of it at least. And one more note about all-wheel drive, it comes with a feature that's increasingly rare in the compact SUV segment, in that it's selectable. There's a button down here to the left of the steering wheel that lets you switch between two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive manually. Is that a feature a lot of compact SUV buyers are looking for these days? I wouldn't say so, but the people who want it are really going to want it, and it's nice to have that kind of control over your fuel economy. And speaking of fuel economy, that's another issue. So Natural Resources Canada rates the Equinox 1.5 at 10 liters per 100 kilometers in the city, 8.2 on the highway, and 9.2 combined. Here in my own testing, over 200 kilometers or so of what's been mostly city driving, about 50-50 between all-wheel drive and front-wheel drive, I'm showing 11.2 liters per 100 kilometers, and there's a full life reading in this car here over 2,600 kilometers, showing an average of 9.9. That is not great. Even among the gas-powered competition, you want a compact SUV to be somewhere in the 8s. And if fuel economy is really important to you, you could look to the Nissan Rogue, which, without having any electrification whatsoever, goes down to 7.6 liters per 100 kilometers combined. And that's before we even start talking about hybrids. We know that GM has opted to go fully all in on EVs. I tend to think they're going to regret that decision because hybrid compact SUVs are in such incredibly high demand, and this would be a perfect candidate for that kind of powertrain, and it doesn't look like we're ever going to see it. So you're either choosing this, which is really not great on fuel at all, or the EV, and there are a lot of buyers who aren't ready for that. So it's really a shame there's not a middle ground here. Now, where GM is absolutely knocking it out of the park lately is in tech, and that carries through here to the Equinox. We've got a twin set of LCD screens here, an 11-inch digital instrument cluster, and an 11.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system. This runs Google built-in and also has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Some GM vehicles don't these days, so this is really nice to see and all works really nicely. I've had zero connectivity issues. Everything has worked exactly as intended, and it's very seamless, very easy to learn. This is not united under a single panel as we're seeing a lot of automakers do these days. It's split up visually, but it looks really, really sharp. The colors are nice and crisp. Everything's easy to read. It's really well done. Finally, let's look at the pricing. So if you go for a base Chevy Equinox, and that would be the front wheel drive, then you're looking at a starting price of $36,533. You can, of course, add all-wheel drive to that for an extra charge, and then you have the Active and RS trims, which are the two top trims, slightly different interpretations, but same starting price. To get to the as-tested price here in the Equinox, we need to add a couple of packages, including the Safety and Technology package for $12.95, the Convenience Package 3 for $10.95, the Panoramic Sunroof is an extra $16.95, and then we pay extra for the black roof and the Radiant Red paint, which brings us to a total as-tested price of $48,983, and that includes the destination charge. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, if we had talked about a top trim SUV in Canada pushing $50,000, that would have seemed insane. But today it's really quite normal, and at less than $50,000 for this top trim, the Equinox actually presents a pretty decent value. Especially with stylish design like this and this level of tech that works so seamlessly. The question really comes down to space. Do people need that extra cargo area that comes from so many of the competitors? And fuel economy. Are drivers going to be willing to pay more at the pumps to get a vehicle like this when there are so many hybrid compact SUV options on the road? My sense is if you're a GM household, you're going to love the new Equinox. It's a vast improvement over the previous generation, and it's going to do a great job of keeping people in the GM family. But with so many more spacious and more efficient options out there, I think the new Equinox may have a hard time winning over new customers. So the short version is this. If you're looking for the most fuel efficiency or interior space in the compact SUV segment, the Equinox isn't it. But if you're looking for the best looking exterior and the best tech anywhere in the industry, give the Equinox a closer look. For Driving.ca, I'm Stephanie Walcraft. Visit Driving.ca to read the full review of the 2025 Chevrolet Equinox and follow us on social media.